Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and today I want to talk about New World, the upcoming MMORPG from Amazon Studios. So this is a game that I actually never had much interest in for basically like the vast majority of its time frame, but a couple weekends ago, there was an open beta period for the game, and this essentially presented me, and tons of other people of course, the opportunity to try the game for free. While I do admit I have a hard time branching out and like playing multiple games, I decided this was important for me to do. Basically, the only thing I knew about the game that it was modern and a modern style MMO, that is, meaning it wasn't the good old tab target and ability bars combat system that I love so much. And based on my experience with similar MMOs in the past, I didn't really like this type of gameplay in these systems, even though I do love the MMO genre. But the point here is that I thought I should give this new game, New World, a fair try, and this was the perfect opportunity. So I did play the last open beta weekend, which I know was a few weeks ago in this videos, coming a little bit late, but I played that for about 4.5 hours in a single play session. And if you are familiar with me, then the fact that I played that beta for that long tells you I definitely enjoyed the game, and now I can confidently say that I want to purchase New World when it comes out, and I do want to play the game. So from about a 24-hour span of applying for the beta, downloading Steam, then downloading the game and playing the game even just for the first couple hours, never mind the full duration, I went from knowing very little about New World to knowing I want to play and buy the game. So how did that come to be? Well, one honest benefit that was actually immediately noticeable was that I actually utilized my GPU and even multiple cores on my CPU, and compared to my main other game, The Lord of the Rings Online, that is actually a huge bonus. But that note aside, my experience in the beta could be summarized in 2 words: surprisingly fun. I went in, honestly not expecting to enjoy the combat system that much, but to my delight, that did not pan out in reality. Even though you only have 3 active abilities, the combat still felt engaging. I think one big reason is the base gameplay mechanics of attacking, blocking, and dodging. Auto-attacking, you could call it, has 2 functions. One is a succession of like normal attacks, and the other is charging your weapon for a heavy attack. These 2 things themselves actually added an unexpected dynamic in combat and gameplay, and that for me added an extra layer to keep me engaged. On top of that, we do have the defensive mechanics of blocking and dodging, and personally, I got most used to blocking early on, and after a couple hours, I did start to practice dodging more frequently. But both of these made me strategize fights in a way that I was not used to, in a way that I have not been conditioned to by other games. This is my first real taste of actually doing that and finding it interesting. But for me, the MMOs that I regularly play, they do have block, parry, evade, and dodge, but they're all passive things that rely on chance based on character stats. While I don't think that is a bad thing for those games, having player input be required for these, it did make combat more dynamic and once again added a layer of engagement for me in New World. Now, the next part of combat that I didn't really get to experience until probably like an hour or 2 into my stream was weapon mechanics, and more specifically that you have 2 weapons equipped at a time. Your character's abilities are tied to your weapons in this game, so with 2 weapons you essentially actually have a set of 6 abilities, even though only 3 are active at a time. Weapon swapping seems to be fairly simple in that you only have to press a button and go through a brief animation, then you are ready to use your new weapon. I certainly did not come close to masterizing or I think even fully utilizing this game mechanic, but it once again is another layer of engagement that helped me enjoy combat. So with these engagement layers, I really did feel like combat was surprisingly fun despite only having 3 active abilities at a time, which would be a big concern for me about like any MMO that I am aware of and haven't played. But continuing on with the gameplay in New World, I do want to talk about the weapon variety. So in the beta, I made sure to try every weapon type available in the game to give them all, say, a fair chance. Surprisingly, I did not like the spellcasting weapons, even though that is usually what I tend to go towards in MMOs. I go for like mages, spellcasters, and that type of thing. But perhaps that is partially because I didn't really play the beta that long, but they just didn't quite feel right to me. On the other hand, I did love the melee/physical weapons, and when I start the game for real after launch, I will likely end up tending towards favoring those. A few of my favorites did include the Warhammer, the Spear, and shockingly, the gun was quite fun, which would be a first in any MMO for me that actually find guns as a fun weapon. But moving on from combat, I do want to cover character building. I only got to like level 8 or something in the beta, so I didn't really get that high level, but what I saw with character building, I actually quite liked. On top of a large amount of choice given to your character, it looked like there was a lot of flexibility, especially up to level 20, where you could respec your stats for free, so you can kind of explore and discover what you like. This was also quite helpful for me to try different builds with different weapons. I could optimize my character for the weapon I was using at the time, and all you have to do is click the respec button and go through that again. And I think the most important thing here is that I was actually interested in the building of my character and was excited to invest time and effort into that. And with that, my exposure to character building is another thing that made me enjoy the beta experience and want to play the game after the full release. But now we can go ahead and move on from the base gameplay and combat, and the next part I experienced in the game was crafting. So my immediate reaction to crafting is that it looked fun, both crafting and gathering, that is. While, like everything in the beta, I had limited experience, the crafting systems in the game looked promising to me, and it felt like one of the things I really liked is that the whole world was harvestable. And to help with the immersive experience as far as harvesting, all the resources also looked pretty natural, like the rock veins, the trees that you chopped, and all that sort of stuff. Now, one thing with crafting that I would have to get used to is the inventory weight system. There were a couple points where I felt like I was starting to get a little bit annoyed that I was getting to the encumbrance weight and essentially couldn't gather anymore. Even if it was annoying at first, that does make logical sense, so maybe it's just something I'll have to evaluate when the game comes out, whether it's more of an annoying thing or something that makes enough sense and has enough flavor to it that I actually enjoy that system. We will see. Otherwise, with crafting itself, and specifically not gathering, I experienced even less of that actually, but I should like it as long as you can craft useful items and as long as the crafting is not necessary in the game. Moving on, somewhat related to the crafting is the town storage system. This is something that again makes logical sense to me, but I'm honestly not too sure how much I like the idea of your storage being tied to location. So in New World, the vault is not shared between towns, and to me this seems like it will be a big inconvenience moving forward, but I guess we'll have to see how that actually plays out. One note I do have is that I like that you can craft using items that you put in your town storage, so at least there's that. Alright, shifting topics quite a bit, one big aspect in MMOs that helps facilitate the immersion in the game and the enjoyability of the gameplay is the world building. Unfortunately, I did not get to see a large variety of environments in my beta experience. Only towards the last half hour of my play session did I go out exploring, but that was still in the single zone that I stayed in the entire time of my beta. Now, this is something I haven't talked about too much in this video, but I don't really like playing betas too much and kind of spoiling the game for myself, so this is actually something I don't find to be a problem. But to go on about what I did see in that zone is the in general environment in the game I thought was pretty well done, especially in regards to, again, crafting, and the visuals with the graphics were pretty nice. I also found myself liking the art style in the game. With what I saw, while it was limited, it was definitely interesting enough that I am excited to see what the rest of the world looks like eventually. And at this point, I want to make it very clear that I don't think the world building in the game is bad, but from what I saw, some distant landscapes did not really impress me all that much. But I also come from my main game being Lotra, where distant landscapes are essentially the best I have seen actually in basically any game, even if the graphics in Lotra are a little bit iffy, we'll say. But in New World, I noticed distant landscapes had distant fog obscuring faraway areas, so it's perhaps something I will miss in this game, but we will see on that. I do have to, again, explore a lot of the game world still. And I will say at least the visual quality and the graphics were still looking quite good, even for things off like way in the distance. Again, a great thing from my beta experience is that I am excited to explore the rest of the world eventually. Moving on, we have some not so great parts from my experience to cover. And the worst part of the beta was actually getting into the game world and the starter zone experience. More so, it seems the zone you start in is random from a select few potential options. While I think it would be nice to have user choice in this matter, what this was really bad for, I think, is for a core MMORPG element, which is playing with other people. If you want to group with your friends like right from the start and play with them, essentially you have to re-roll your character, as in like delete and remake it. You have to do that until everyone in the group gets the same starting zone. And I honestly just don't think this is a good system at all. And in fact, it was the worst part of my beta experience because I frustratingly found that out as I tried to play with a friend from the start. Now, there is technically the option of traveling through dangerous areas in hopes to meet up at a starting area, but even then, that has seemingly low chance of success and is frustrating either way. So to remedy this issue by release, I would love to see either player choice in starting zone, or if you still want to keep that random, at least give a way for people to group up with players and their friends and all start in the same zone right from the beginning. But that big negative that I had was pretty much it though, so I consider that a good thing that the worst part of my beta experience was actually the starting zone issue. But because my playtime in the beta was overall fairly short, there are definitely some parts of the game that I did not experience that I still have some concern about that seemed like there are potentials for negatives and of course some potentials for great things there as well. Before that, I do actually have a quick note on traveling by foot. While your character does run at decent speed, I would love to see some sort of sprint button, and mechanically I think that could work by taking like your dodge or block energy, that thing. This was something that I just felt like was missing in the beta experience, a short burst sprint, even if it isn't a long-term speed boost like a mount, which I feel like is a whole different topic. I'm kind of indifferent towards mounts at this point from my experience in the game. But yeah, if the sprint isn't not even like a long-term speed boost, I think a short sprint burst would at least give the illusion to traveling faster. And again, for me, it just felt like something that was missing. But moving on from that, let's go ahead and get on to my actual concerns. And number one here is player versus environment or PvE content. While my knowledge on the game used to be basically zero and is still limited, I did see that New World was originally intended to have a heavy PvP focus with little PvE content. Personally, in MMOs, I am most interested in adventuring, leveling, and running PvE group content. The longevity of my interest in the game could largely depend on if there is engaging group content for me to do, especially like with my friends. I am a fan of like typical dungeons, instance dungeons that is, and raids and that type of stuff. So a big hope of mine at this point is that there will be, or already is, that type of content in the game, and that I will actually find it fun. I'd also hope to run this type of content while leveling. So unfortunately, my lack of knowledge here on the game at this point really helps create this concern, but is something for me to look forward to discovering when I get to playing through the game more with its full release. Moving on, the next area of concern I have is with the faction split. While it seems PvP is completely optional, I am not too sure on a heavy faction split being good. Also, I'm not 100% familiar, like a lot of things here, with what you can and cannot do with players on different factions. But to me, any sort of limitation here just doesn't sound good. And my impression from the beta was that factions were a major and core part of the game, but hopefully it turns out it just doesn't really matter for non-PvP gameplay experience and all is fine there from my viewpoint. But moving on, I do have one final area of concern, and that is on the questing experience. I am perhaps a bit unusual in that I often prefer side quests over main story quests in games. In the beta, I don't think I ran into a single side quest, and my concern is that there will be like very little to no engaging side quests or stories. That in itself may not be a problem, but additionally, I do worry that doing main story quests will be required, or at least like quasi-required, as in they are required for proper progression, like in other games I have played. While I am also usually happy to do story quests, and in some games and cases actually really enjoy story quests, I also do like having player choice in what content I do, and essentially being able to play the game how I want without hindering my character progression given the systems and content available in the game. This is actually one of the biggest issues I have with Lotro at the moment, where you have all these options for content, but to get core character progression, you have to do specific content in specific areas, and you have to repeat all of that specific content on alts instead of being able to choose what you want to do, especially, again, on alts given Lotro's content and systems that they offer for you to play through. And that is actually one of the big reasons I don't play Lotro as much as I otherwise would. But anyway, we can set that note aside, and it's something that I am just conditioned to being against and would love to see freedom of choice essentially for leveling and just character progression. after all this, it is something I am actually excited to explore and find out when the game releases, kind of just like all these other aspects of the game that I saw in the open beta experience that I had. So yeah, after almost 5 hours of beta playtime and this video, I am quite excited for the game to actually release, which is very soon, and get to actually playing it. Now, I don't frequently get too excited about new games, so this is a particularly difficult achievement actually for New World, and I hope that is reflected in this commentary and video. I am interested in what you all think about the game if you do want to comment your thoughts and if you will be buying it. I know at this point the game is actually coming out, I think in a couple days if I get it uploaded today, because this video is actually coming about 2 weeks late due to some delays. But anyway, as far as this video goes, I still hope you all enjoyed it and learned something useful, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more or becoming a channel member to support the content, like the purchase of this game actually, and thanks for watching everyone.